I got my Sharpie. Today is another alphabet loop day, which I've not had in a day, in like 2 days. So today it's going to be an E, and the plan is to have, eventually you're going to have big E, but I think the easiest way to do it is to make this guy come up, do a little bit of a curve in that way, rest for half a second, and then these two guys go out. So it'll end up, I gotta decide whether or not I want it to, maybe I'll have it corkscrew behind, because most of the other times I have it going in front. And then have it so eventually it's that's the form that I want to go. And then how do I want it to end after that? Because if this is twisting like this, it means that the nose will go around here. This will be black. And then I can have it be black here. And then, because it's twisting in this direction, then have it come back around. So it's like that. And then this one will just be, or I could have it twist this way and have the lips going out that way. I think that might be the most interesting option. So if that's the case, I could either twist back here. Hello, Eileen. I remembered. I'm glad, Bats94, that I'm inspiring you. And what was, are you teaching people how to learn? Maybe? I don't know. I'm talking through the process of how I want this animation to go. So this is how the E will end up looking and the positioning of some things. And I have to figure out how I want to make that return to just being a little guy on this left corner. Gotta be careful. I got some blue ink on my finger. So how best to have this return? Could either have all of these condense up here, bounce and land, or it could be that it undoes to here and then sort of like from one of these guys rotates. I'd have to roll in this direction. So I'd have to twist to be like this sort of dude to where it lands flat upside down. I think my preferred methodology is to have it then twist up here, come down, bounce over. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So first things first, I got to draw out this E. Okay. Now that I'm getting here, I'm going to tighten this up a little. Can I go one further? Should be good. Hey, RT Maniamus. It's a little bit colder here. Hope that you're staying warm. I'm doing fine. I'm running out of space. I'm having some tea. That's what I'm doing off to the side. Okay. So I need to do an outline. Say her name. Say her name is in reference to a woman who, her name is Breonna Taylor, and she was killed by police in her home in Louisville, Kentucky. And it's working to maintain awareness about police violence, specifically towards people of color. But police violence in general. Letter project, just doing something. I can work without music. I've gotten more in the habit of it. But makes it so I can record these and share them to different platforms and I don't get chastised by YouTube or Instagram as I'm working on stuff. Letter project, it's just something that has a format to it that I can follow pretty easily. Has some changes and it's building and has a context that people can feel a reference or connection to pretty immediately and simply. Hello, Masomi. Masomi. Thanks, Sir Animal. than TV. Depends on the TV and what you're looking for. Appreciate the support. This is an E. Is the intention. Hello, it's Lemonade. Hello, Barb Sync too. No cuff. I forgot. That's over there. I could wear it, but I'm just not wearing it. I don't really use Pinterest. I know that some of my stuff is on Pinterest, but I don't personally use it. Hello, Nexus. Glad to have some folks watching. Hello, one normal coffee. My dinner last night was fine. It's pretty quick and simple. How was your dinner? Glad that your dinner was fine. Oh. Not bad. Hello, Gloff. When I see Gloff, it makes me think of a goth sloth. Eat vegetables? Vegetals? Bread and cheese. Sound of the paper. That's a nice sound. After I get through this, I'm gonna head out for half a second because I need to use the bathroom. These are out of order. Oh no, okay. Whew. I was like, where are the last ones? Okay, gotta use the bathroom. All right. Back to it. Where did I set the brush? Hello, I'm back after a long and arduous journey to the bathroom. You're primarily a vegetarian. That's cool. I eat meat pretty frequently. I'm sorry. I'm my best not to leave you alone for so long. Hello, dwix. Hello, Zinshi. She. Hello, Matthew Favre. Maddie? I'm not sure what your name is. Hello, Majo Maho. Hello, Paulinan. Polly. Hello, Asia. Asia. I don't really. I enjoy when people compliment my art. I don't like it when people make fun of it or criticize it, but that's just being a person, I think. I'm fine with people giving opinions on my art. It's part of doing art. If I'm being honest, I prefer when people compliment things than when they're critical of them. Let's see. Hello, Sajala. Hope the wedding scene went well. Hello, Noodle Soup. I don't know how to say people's names part of the time. It's something where you start reading it and like you think I can read, then you lose confidence midway into it, and then you're worried that like you're coming across like you're trying to make fun of someone's name or something, which isn't my intent. Hope you're doing well, Rose. Your shirt is serving you well. I think that most of my family and friends accept my choices with things. At least that's how they convey it to me. But my family's not particularly confrontational with anything. I have some rough sketches, so the process of this, what I did was, I don't know how much this is visible in here. I've got like the loose idea of the progression and a rough sketch there, and then I have this guy, which I sketched out the shape first in pencil to get the general width of things decent. I'd go here and there with my ability to do that. And then traced out like a loose middle sort of section. And now it's just pulling it back from that. That's okay. A lot of the time for that sort of motion, I just imagine it. But for the sake of streaming and showcasing and later posting stuff up, I think it's worthwhile to have that drawing happening so that there's a little bit clearer of a visual explanation of what's happening. The question is, how do you know what FPS I'm going to be working on? I've just worked at the same frame rate, the same FPS, frames per second, for a while, and it's just I know what it what it feels like to work at 15 FPS. Every now and again, I have to slow it down, but I've got a pretty good sense of things. I would likely struggle if I were thrown into a situation where I had to animate at a different frame rate. I just wouldn't get the movement quite right. Pretty good at being able to understand the structure of things. Zenshi. I did go to art school for graphic design. It's crushed out. I don't know that these faces have a specific gender. It's whatever you, as the viewer, want to think of them as. Think of them as. Because I identify as a man, I tend to project that onto these faces, but that's me. You don't have to do that. You can think of the faces as any gender you would prefer. Oh, well, good luck on your exam. Thank you, H. Zola. Zola? Zenshi. Did I say it decently? Hopefully I did. But yeah, good luck on your exam. It dries pretty quickly. Depends on how you apply it, and what you're applying it to. Thanks for watching. Polly. I'm gonna say Polly. Polinani. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Hello, Asdrubale. If you want to see it in full, you can watch it on YouTube, and I'll post the time-lapse version here, and on TikTok, same username there. You don't have to apologize. What's my sign? I do my best not to give out specific information that could be used to do tracking stuff or things about me. I know that it's available, but I feel weird when I'm just prompted with it. I answer in this sort of setting. It's okay if you were away. to apologize for not being here for the entire however many hours I end up working. I appreciate the support in small ways and larger ways. I appreciate you being conscientious of things, but it's not necessary for you to apologize for being away. Hope your tablet starts not acting up so much. We're about to where I'm gonna prefer to use both this brush and the chisel. Time that I need to get a new one of these brushes. Very least wash them. See if this one behaves at all. Sort of doubtful of it. Let me see. Nope. I could try to talk about traditional animation, but my methodology isn't exactly. Question is, would you like to do a traditional animation workshop at my university? I can talk through my process and how I approach things, but I don't have the method and process that I use isn't like a standard standard approach where I don't work with keyframes and such. I work sort of around those sorts of established methodology. But I'm up for trying to do some sort of something. If you want to talk about it further, it's probably best to email me. TraceLoops@traceloops.com. It's probably the best next step if you wanted to explore more of that. I have some tea here. Yeah, I'm not sorry for doing anything in France. I'm not super comfortable traveling right now. Both for my sake and the sake of others. But if you wanted to try and coordinate something with a remote learning sort of deal, I'd be happy to try and work with that. It might be easier for me to develop something, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll drink some tea. I had like a full glass of tea before starting into this. And earlier I had a smoothie. It had a lot of water in it, which is why I had to leave a little bit earlier to go and use the bathroom for a moment. But Aline, if you were interested, try to coordinate something for the future once things have settled down in a different manner. I'd be up for traveling or something, but right now stuff's getting worse in this area of the US, and it seems like most places that are suffering from stuff having issues. And thank you for Shorty Behaves for caring about my well-being and telling me to drink some water. It is something that sometimes I forget. I do not speak French, if that's something that is necessary for teaching a workshop or something. I would need someone to translate. Thanks for reaching out. I'm not super well versed in teaching people. I can explain stuff for a while, but as far as having a succinct lesson plan and stuff like that, there might be a little bit of a growing pain. And setting that up. I have a Spotify account. If you search Can I Kicked It? CANIKICKEDIT. Can I Kicked It? You can find stuff I have as public playlists on Spotify. You can see some music that I have. A lot of the time, if you see something that's like a now playing, which I forget if I have that turned off, but I play podcasts through Spotify, depending. Hello, Nick, I'm not sure what your username is conveying. I see an N and a K, which makes me think of Nick. Hello, Zai. Thanks, Oliver, for the thumbs up. I've messed up on frames. Usually not terribly. I'm pretty forgiving to myself. And it's somewhat forgiving as a practice. If I mess up on a frame, I usually just restart that frame or redo it. Depending on what it is, I might try to fix it digitally if it's like a stray mark or something, but part of the process. And the style and the aesthetic is the textural elements that might be considered mistakes. Depending on who's working on the stuff. I ignore depending. I can usually judge whether or not it's something that can be salvaged, something to ignore, or something to replace. The lips have it is an E. That's the intention of it. And this is something that probably gets more clear, more understood in context or with the other letters surrounding it. This is Sumi ink, S-U-M-I ink, and tracing paper. Then this is a 1/4 inch angular shader brush, and the other brush that I'm using is a round brush that doesn't have an official size to it, but it's around a size 0 brush. 0. The letter R is a bit away because I'm going in order. probably be within a month if I keep up with this. I'm not sure because I've been having some other obligations that don't let me do a full animation. Instead, focus on a still. Excuse me. You can say trace. But if you go to my website, you can see my given name. Are you asking for an email? If it's in an email, you can say trace, but eventually I'll just include my name. Favorite movie at the moment? I can tell you the last movie I watched. I don't know what my favorite movie at the moment is. The last movie I watched, I think, was the 1989 Tim Burton, Michael Keaton Batman. It's weird looking back on those sorts of things and seeing the limitations, the aesthetics and such. I really like Fargo and American Movie. This is Spinal Tap. Various Christopher Guest movies. Don't really have projects in the works right now unless some stuff comes through. It's sort of always a ebb and flow, and most of the time if I do have a project I can't speak on it until it's public. The most I'll say in those situations is that I'm working on a project, but I can't specify anything about it unless part of the project itself is promoting it while working on it, which may or may not take place in the future, but as things stand. Hello, Snowy Beats. It's pretty broad. That's maybe the question people ask the most is how much time. I look like Frances McDormand? Okay, I'll take it. I like Frances McDormand. That is one I've never gotten. That's funny. How much time on one design? It's pretty broad. Depends on what it is. If it's experimental and I'm learning as I'm working, maybe that's why I like Fargo, because I like Frances McDormand, or that I look like her, and I see myself in that pregnant police officer exploring the Midwest tundra. Something like this will take probably 3 to 4 hours. But if it's a still image, I can do it in like less than an hour. Usually there's a concept behind it, and most of the time when people are like, how long does it take you to do something that doesn't take into account the time it takes to learn how to do something. And that's where the real worth of someone's work comes in. A fun fact of mine. I don't know. Being a mysterious person, I don't think I'm that mysterious exactly. I'm pretty present in these spaces and I talk a lot. It's more I don't want to be outwardly public with personal information, because that can come back to bite you. And I also Hate icebreakers. One of my least favorite things to do. They work and I understand it, but I don't like them. I look too relaxed to be Frances McDormand, or just in general? I don't like icebreakers. I don't know if that translates or if you're familiar with it. An icebreaker is like a game or a question or some sort of interaction that is meant to break the ice, to like if you don't know someone, to introduce yourself. And I don't like those games. They make me anxious, and I feel like I'm not being honest with it. Some people love them. Those people are better at socializing. But I don't like them. Two truths and a lie. I have to lie, and I feel like I'm being dishonest in the interaction itself. I don't know if you're familiar with, you being the just general whoever's watching, if you're familiar with the game Telephone, but I had a realization relatively recently, where I don't like that game unless I'm like the second person who hears the thing. So the game of Telephone is the first person says something to the next person, like whispers it in their ear, and then the person then whispers what they heard into the next person's ear, and it keeps going, and then at the end you see how good you did and whether or not you were able to keep that word going. And I talked with my older sister, and we're both in the same boat where we're like, we hate this game. And okay, you know, the telephone game. I don't know how well some of you are in different countries. I'm not 100% sure what everyone's experience is, but my sister and I hate that game because, like, or my least favorite thing to do would be the person announcing it, or the person who had to come up with the statement. Because coming up with a statement, you're responsible for the enjoyment and the experience of everyone in that game. And there's pressure to come up with something that's like funny or whatever. And so my favorite thing to be would be like the second or third person from the start, where I'm pretty confident that I know what the word or phrase is, so I can just pass it along as is. My least favorite position being the last person who has to hear and then announce what the word is, because my goal in that game is to say precisely what the first person said, to get the phrase or the word correct. So it's not fun for anyone else when I'm just like, the person said cabbage at the start, guess what? Cabbage at the end. We did it, you guys. But I talked with other people, and some people like to be the person who messes it up, who while being in the line of stuff they want to say, something that like sounds like the initial word and intentionally mess it up because it's funny and it's fun. Um, that is not what I'm doing. And then some other people want to be the person at the end who gets to announce the funny thing and get all the attention about it. Where I don't like to be the person who announces it because then I am responsible for saying something that might not be the right information. I don't like that sense of responsibility for telling people, for lying at the end and announcing to everybody, hi, I'm the person who is the face of accountability, and it's wrong. That's how I feel playing telephone. So that's a sort of icebreaker, and why I'm not fun for icebreakers, because my whole intention is to do everything correctly and factually, which is not how people bond in team building exercises and stuff like that. But it's something that you can use to better understand people's preferences or attitudes on things, what their experience with the game telephone is, and where they want to be. I don't like the game telephone. There was some question. Someone asked if I've done serigraphy. I've done screen printing. That's what it is. I feel like I'm doubting myself. I've done it. I enjoy it. It's just not practical for the number of shirts and stuff that I am selling. I'm selling relatively low numbers, so I want to have variety to the designs and such, and so that works better with direct to garment, where the actual cost per shirt is higher than if you were to have like a screen printed thing of like 30 plus shirts. But I'm not selling 30 of each shirt, I'm selling just a few, and so I'd rather create a variety of designs and work from there. What was I thinking? Another game that I liked better was Heads Up 7 Up. Where that's the game where all the kids put their heads down and put their thumbs up, and then there's a group of 7 people that will go around and choose someone and touch their thumb, and then once everyone's been chosen, heads up, 7 up. So the 7 people who were chosen then get to guess who chose them. And what I would do if I was ever someone choosing people is I would go for best friends and try to choose them first, so that I was the least expected. They would always assume, or a lot of the time people would assume, that their friends were the ones who touched their thumb, chose them, but I was like, not if I can't get there first. So that was my strategy. Later in life, I found out that it's a tool that helps teachers to find out kids that will cheat at things, because it's a pretty easy game to cheat at if you open your eyes when your head's down, even if it's not super obvious. You can just look at stuff. Hello, Amelia. Thanks for saying you're a fan. I appreciate it. But some kids, when playing Heads Up 7 Up, what they'll do is they'll just look at people's shoes, and then they can tell who chose them without being super obvious about it. And part of that can be used as a tool by the teacher to know kids that are more inclined to cheat, which I didn't know. In most sports, I would play I was going to say defensive positions, and then I decided to just say defense. But it sounds funny when you say I'm playing defense. Because I just paid attention to stuff, but I wasn't aggressive in the way that like in soccer, a striker or forward would be. And I didn't have the endurance to play midfield and be sort of in between, so I played defense. Just pay attention and hope. I also played goalie in soccer. Jammed my fingers a bunch of times. I was the best goalie on my team that wasn't better at another position, because there were people who were just overall more athletic. But what I didn't like about goalie was that people blame you for being the last line of defense. When it's like, why couldn't you block that? And it's like, it shouldn't have ever gotten to me. Ideally, you guys wouldn't have had any chance to get up this way. But I like playing goalie. Hello, Rasuad. Sorry if I'm saying your name weird. Or like some folks, your name is not at all in your username. Hello, Pedro. Hello, Honest Phil. The ink is Sumi ink, S-U-M-I. And the brand is Yasutomo. Again, that's S-U-M-I, Sumi ink. It's a Japanese ink. It's a little bit more than like the cheapest things of India ink that you might come across. I'm not sure where you're based at, but like Speedball ink is a little bit cheaper, but it doesn't behave as nicely, and it's not as rich of a black. But it's cheaper. Depending on what you're using it for, it might be better. If you're using a technical pen that's refillable, don't use Sumi ink. A fountain pen or something like that, don't use Sumi ink if it has an ink well in it, because it'll gum it all up. It's not meant for use in a fountain pen, stuff like that. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about, you got an E name, so you're probably enjoying the E. Oh, that might be a delivery that I was expecting yesterday. I gotta go to the post office tomorrow, if that is that delivery. I also have to go to the post office regardless, because I didn't find time today. We're getting closer to being done. I'm trying to get this guy going again a little bit. How long have I been doing animation? When did I start? I've been doing this sort of style of stuff for about 8 years. But my first introduction to animation is something that I was doing probably when I was like 12 or so. I forget how old you are in different grades. I first used Macromedia Flash and also did some exploration using I'm gonna think of it. Flipbooks. I did some flipbooks, and I animated in high school a bit. Got better at it with time. Almost done. last frame. All right. Hello, Reno. Hope you're doing well. Back to here. Okay. I'm pretty much done with the animation aspect of things. On the previous page? No. I'm doing fine. Here. That's what the E is looking like. Now let's crop this in a little bit. Hello, Jensen. Is that good? Can I get a little tighter or no? Yeah, I can. Oh, that's a little bit better. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So let's use backwards. "42 frames. It's Jackie Robinson. It's the answer to everything. Or I forget how it's actually phrased. Oh, hope your animation's going well, Jensen. In Hitchhiker's Guide, I forget what 42 is specifically, like what the question is. Because it always gets quoted slightly different. I've never read the book, but watched the movie at some point. Okay. Scanning time. Buttons, custom size, maybe 600. This can be 4. Now, E is going to a different location. Jump up Live Designs 11-24-2020. Today's the 24th. New folder. Scans. She was there. Scan. I don't think I'm sleepy. I was sleepy. Or am I sleeping? No, I'm scanning. It's arguably the least interesting part of my live streams. Funniest movie or series that I've watched. Talked about before being a big fan of King of the Hill. Within the last year or so, my favorite comedies, maybe it's like last few years, but a big fan of Detroiters, which was on Comedy Central with Tim Robinson and Sam, what's his last name? Richardson. Really enjoyed that. And then I really enjoy the BBC mockumentary This Country. And then just in the last few days I watched How To with John Olson, and I really enjoy that. But the one that I return to most often is probably King of the Hill. Also really enjoy home movies. Another animated show. I enjoy Bob's Burgers, but home movies has a little bit more, I don't know. Maybe it's just the time that it was created, and I have a nostalgia for it, and the fact that it's a pretty good metric for finding people that have a similar, just general sensibility of things, humor and such. I watched The Office. I watched both the US and the UK version. And I like the UK version probably a little bit better. I enjoy the US Office. It's just a different sort of like saturation and length and popularity. So not as much the show itself, but the culture and circumstances surrounding it make it tiresome at times. Less so because of the show itself, and more because the surrounding atmosphere. but it's a very good comfort show for being familiar and revisiting it. That's how I treat something like King of the Hill. I don't know what the funniest movie. I really enjoy, as far as funny movies are concerned, Spinal Tap, or This Is Spinal Tap, Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show. I think those are my favorite mockumentary movies. And as far as documentary that is funny, that I enjoy, I really like American Movie, which is the second time that movies have come up in today's stuff. I was trying to think if... I don't think I know much in the realm of Mexican television or movies. So I know that you're in Mexico. Hello. I don't know if that's a hard G or a soft G or what. I'm just gonna say Galo. I'm trying to think what my favorite like non-English movies or series are. Humor is something that doesn't translate as well. That's why one reason there are fewer comedies nowadays that are produced as feature-length films. They're not as expensive as like action movies, but there's not the same international market. Actions and dramas translate better, but like slice of life comedy things are very culturally specific a lot of the time, and so they don't do as well internationally. Most of the comedies that I've enjoyed tend to be, if they're not based in the US, are from Great Britain or Ireland, or from the United Kingdom or Ireland, or English language. Or some Canadian things as well. Growing up, it was something that like made me uncomfortable, but I enjoyed was Kids in the Hall, and that's a Canadian thing. And then recently went through, after watching the first few episodes with my with my older sister, watched all of Schitt's Creek, which is Canadian. There are a number of Canadian-born comedic actors and performers like Jim Carrey, Eugene Levy, Christopher Guest, what's his name? Will Arnett, Catherine O'Hara. I don't know if that guy's, but a lot of people who came out of SCTV and Kids in the Hall. So all the Kids in the Hall people are Canadian. And I'm drawing a blank. Dave Foley. He's Canadian. Hello, Sanmimu. Sanmi? Sand? I'm not sure how to interpret your name. think that there's a degree of, or there's some bit of culture for Canadian stuff where I remember hearing at some point someone describe like that there's a stereotype that all Canadians are super polite. And then I heard someone from Canada say that it's not so much that Canadians are like overly polite, they're just non-confrontational. So it's a lot more like passive-aggressive things. And it's sort of like, here's a statement, don't you understand what I'm saying? Key and Peele, they're funny. They, I think both, I'm not 100% sure, but they tried out for like SNL stuff, but they didn't make it. But ultimately they found a voice and situation that was better fitting for their work. If you're talking about finding terror or horror, there's a lot more with Jordan Peele, that he's creating a different sort of environment for horror, but part of the appeal for horror movies in general is that you can usually get away with a much smaller budget because they're usually pretty confined. Remote locations, outdoor, low lighting, and it's more in the editing, and it's not as necessary to have a known actor. You can have that sort of attraction, but you can do pretty low budget horror movies, and so long as like you make a little bit of money, then you're good. There was a film production company in the 80s that had a weird sort of business model where what they did was they just produced movies, on movies, like one a month, ultimately, or something like that. Or maybe not quite to that degree, but canon films. And all they needed was like one thing to do decently. I have not actually seen Hereditary, but heard good things about it. Trying to think of other horror movies that don't have jump scares. There's stuff like I've also not seen. Sorry, let me talk a little bit more about canon films. They made a bunch of terrible movies, but their best known are Breakin' and Breakin' 2. Then they lost all of their money pretty much investing in trying to make Over the Top happen. Over the Top was a Sylvester Stallone movie about arm wrestling, and they paid him way too much for it, and then it bankrupted them because it was not a success. Wrong selection. Rename these items. E, start at 1, name counter, rename. Let me drag these over and see if I got the right name, or the right order to things. That's 2. Where did 1 end up? Oh wait, 1 is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe these are now correct. So let's try this again. Edit, rename. Start this. 0. What does it do? Whatever. I'll just name this 42 and that should solve it. Okay, so it should be good now. Files, scripts, load files into stack, browse, desktop, live designs, 24, scans, alphabetically, starts with 1, goes to 2, select all of these, open these up, start doing that, and now we will do display capture. Okay. While that's happening, I'm going to box here. But Canon Films made a bunch of shit, bunch of movies, and a lot of them were bad. They Live is a good movie. It's where a bunch of Shepard Fairey stuff is inspired from. It also has an absurd fight scene in it. I forget who directed They Live. Was that John Carpenter? Or was that Soderbergh? Not Soderbergh. What's the dude who did? I forget. Anyway, I enjoy They Live. Eating some Pocky. Okay, so John Carpenter. John Carpenter is best known for a number of movies, but Halloween gave him all that he needed for a while. John Carpenter has like weird inclusions of violence just as a sort of like. In They Live, there's an extensive, really not necessary but interesting fight sequence where the main character is trying to get his friend to wear a pair of sunglasses. And his friend is not into it. Let's see more or less where this lands. Right about here. Okay, that stretches a bit more than I thought. One of these off. Not really. Okay, so let's crop this down. Give it a moment. My computer's Hey Thomas. Or Tom. Curves. Do an initial bit, make this a bit smaller. Well, it's almost square. Actually, let's crop this width down just a tiny bit. so I can go ahead and get a perfect square because I like the idea. 1080. Resize them. And now let's blow this out. And change the speed. Save this as an animated GIF. Save. We're going slightly out of there to 11/24/2020 underscore alphabet E. Okay, now let's turn off display capture and get this image going. Browsing around. My designs 1024 alphabet. So this animation is a good example of animation smears. The return section of it dropping down and going back to the return, it's pretty much only smears. So if you are looking at a frame like it's a little bit further along, where are we getting to? Right about here? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to turn this off for a second. Show you. So, see how distorted this is? And distorted this is? And distorted the next several frames are. This back a little. No, that's too much. Okay. All of these frames are pretty distorted. And when it's playing back, you don't necessarily see it as clearly. But you do have these super exaggerated moments. And if you know that those exist in 2D animation, you can start to recognize it more readily. It's something that, like, you don't see it until you see it, and then you can only see it when it happens. Just one of those sort of reveals that you can experience. I'll let that run for a second as I save these out. Select folder. Render that up. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? I'm gonna let that run for a moment or two. I'm gonna eat some Taki. Ideally, I'll figure out a different sort of motion for F. Maybe it will. I don't want it to be. It was a pretty repetitious thing. This sort of animation. So I don't want to make all the motions be too similar. Because then if you're watching like 30 seconds plus of this style of animation, probably more than that. Like when it's done, it'll probably be like a minute of animation. It gets tiring to see the same thing, the same motions over and over again. So both for myself and for the quality of the alphabet moving in its entirety, I want to try and do some different motions. What was it? How long did this take me? This one took me just about 3 hours. Started around 3. Then do I always follow the same process as I did with the Fiona Apple clip? That's a different sort of approach because of the length of it and the fact that it's so closely tied to the movement. The movement is tied to the music. So a lot of the time I would work like directly on paper, or somehow I'd be less inclined to work digitally as a starting point. But as I was like doing some testing on it, I was having mixed results. The initial plan was to just have, I'd rotoscope her lips doing the movement, and then come back and just animate with like maybe some key elements known along the way, like there's some motion, or there's like a drum, so I should at this number do a drum. But when I tried testing that out, the speed and the movement of things wasn't doing great. And so what I ended up doing was I animated it all frame by frame, hand drawn, but using a stylus on a tablet that I have. But I don't like the look. It's too consistent. It doesn't look right to me. It's too clean. It's awkward for me looking at that sort of thing, and I really wanted to have the feel of it. So what I did was I printed all of those out and then went back and traced all of it frame by frame. Also in the past, I'm less likely to use this pegboard that I have here. And so I'd usually clip things or tape it down or work in some way because of the length and scope of it wasn't something that I needed to have as much of a foundation to work on it. It's the sort of thing where at that scale, saving a little bit of time or saving some time by putting a bit more effort at the start of it saves so much time and effort and makes it a lot easier of a process overall. So I broke it up and worked on it and created something where the process worked well for the final thing. It's still a very time consuming process overall, but I appreciate it and enjoy the final result. What was the frame rate in the Fiona Apple video? The effective frame rate is 15 frames per second, but if you were to somehow get the file, it had to be a different frame rate for standardization of playback on things, which is like 24, 25, 29.97 or 30. I think this one ended up being 29.97. So the actual file itself is about 30 frames per second. It's slightly less, but not to the effective point. It's part of a practicality of broadcast television and legacy from that, and how the frequencies had to line up for colored TV. So the actual playback is about 30 frames per second, but the effective, it just is doubling up every frame. Thanks, Tamara. You were asking about reusing the frames. Most looking forward. I'm looking forward to doing like an M. I'm trying to change up the motion. So like I'm going to turn this off for a second. So like when I did the A, the motion was this. And the obvious answer for a B is to do the same thing. Same direction. Maybe make it a loop there. But I decided not to do that because this is almost the same motion. So instead I had it go the opposite direction so that as it plays back, it has a little bit more variation. And then C was a different one, but I decided to change the orientation. So the movement went from the front and extended the bottom of the face. And then D, I decided to add just a little twist to have a little more variation and to be able to show a little bit more dimension to the item. And then E this time, I wanted to not have the C had a rolling an action and then sort of a rolling out. So I decided to do the center first, wait a second, and then have both go out this way. For F, I don't know. It might be sort of doing a slightly different thing and maybe going up here and extending and then having this sort of hump out instead of twist, instead of a loop, have it push out like that. Just to have a little bit more variation in what the actual animation is as it moves forward, because there's 26 of these and a lot of letters have similar motions in how they're drawn. And so trying to change that up a little bit is, I think it makes for a better end product. And a lot of these are having very similar reset animations, so I'm trying to think more about how to change that up, because this is a pretty similar reset to what the A animation had, and not terribly dissimilar from the B, but it also means that the transition between each letter, if I'm playing it back in order, it's a little bit more dynamic, because a lot of them start with like a slight motion in a direction. So if the reset animation has the face squashing down a little bit, it means that the transition to the next motion sort of, instead of being like stop, rest, and then move, or like go this way and then immediately the other way, if there's a little bit of softness to it, it means that it will always sort of be settling and then starting back up again as it's progressing. Hola, Fan Campus. Any questions, thoughts, concerns, comments, curiosities? I'm gonna let this run for a minute and maybe have you give some questions if you have them while I do my spiel. So, I'm here on Instagram. I've got all those things. For this clip, it took about 3 hours. The materials, this is tracing paper. I used a Sharpie, but most of it was done using a brush and ink, and the ink is Sumi ink. I don't have a brand that there is a brand to this tracing paper, but I don't know what it is offhand, because it's a non-standard one that I bought almost 4,000 sheets of in bulk. So here on Instagram, I'll be posting this animation and the time lapse of this live stream there, and you can watch that there. I'll be uploading the full length of this live stream onto YouTube shortly after ending the broadcast, and you can find that by searching TraceLoops when you're on YouTube. I don't have a like personalized handle or channel link currently because I don't have enough of whatever criteria. But you can watch this and previous live streams. There may or may not be, or there are a couple where I either failed to record, forgot, or recorded part of it. So apologies if you're most interested in those. I can't do anything about replacing those recordings. If you're on TikTok, you can follow me there. It's the same username, TraceLoops, and it'll be similar to what I post here, just a different platform if you prefer or just want to follow me on multiple things, which I appreciate. If you are interested in buying merchandise, you can go to traceloops.com/store, and I will upload a t-shirt that has a grid of the frames of this animation, and you can see previous animation frames on the grid as well as some still styles and stuff like that. A couple prints and some other things happening there as well. If you are outside of the US and want to purchase something from my web store, you can email me, DM me, or however you want to know that you can contact me. My email is traceloops@traceloops.com, and I'll do my best to respond quickly. Most of the t-shirts that are on my website are going to be about $5 more if they're shipping internationally, just because of taxes, costs, and the fact that it takes me a little bit longer to set up, so I round things. It's mostly taxes for importing. If it's something that is a little bit further down in the feed that does not have DTG at the end of it, which stands for direct-to-garment printing, then those prints, shirts, etc. cost a little bit more to ship internationally because I'm the one who's actually doing the shipping. It's not a fulfillment center that has better shipping rates and stuff. So those go up like $20 to $30 from the listed price on the website. T-shirts are $23 up to XL, and then a couple dollars more for 2XL, 3XL, and 4XL. If it's international, add $5 to those prices. So if no one has any additional questions, I will head out in just a moment. Again, you can check out this and other live streams as a recording on YouTube. Just search TraceLoops. Web store is traceloops@traceloops.com. International shipping outside of the US shipping, email, direct message me, or whatever other means you have of contacting me. That's traceloops@traceloops.com is the email. So I'll give this about a minute to see if anyone poses any more questions, comments, or whatever. If not, I'll plan on being back tomorrow. I think tomorrow it'll probably be a still because I'm working on some outside stuff. For Fiona's video, did I calculate something like frames per beat? Not really. The song changes in pace as far as the feel of things pretty frequently and has sort of different elements to it that way. What I did was firstly I rotoscoped her singing the song and thought that might be enough for me to infer certain things, but it wasn't quite. So then I recorded myself doing motions to the song and set that to a timeline and thought that would be enough, but I found that it was a little off. It wasn't quite. So if you look in the process video, you can see that the start of it is me dancing a little bit. I listened to the song and did motions to it to try and get a sense of how I would move to it and how that would relate to the animation. But it wasn't super clear, so what I ended up doing was I had my tablet computer and my laptop running at the same time, and I had just the source video with all of the frame numbers listed out, and I would cross-reference with that with the sound of it, because Photoshop doesn't deal well with audio playback with video, especially on the scale that I was doing. Photoshop's not meant for that, and that's what I was doing the rotoscoping in. For other times where I've worked with musicians and it's visuals or pairing with a song, and instead of it being a full length sort of deal, it's like a short loop. I have worked with that to find out beats per minute, which for that I just use like an online beats per minute calculator and then did the math to see how many frames that would be or how it would work out. It rarely works out correctly because 15 frames per second, it's restrictive in how much you can add or detract from the speed for playback. You can sort of like fake it a little bit by having a frame last half as long if your playback is 30 FPS, which I have done to get it closer. Because if something's looping for a long period of time against some music, then it is very easy for it to get out of, or it gets out of sync after time, because you're not talking about like 1 or 2 loops where like you get relatively close, you're okay. You're talking about like 100 times that something might be looping over if you've got an animation that's a few seconds long, especially if it's for Spotify. I forget what they call it, but when you pull up a song on Spotify and it's got a visual behind it, you have no control over when those start and end. And if someone pauses the music and starts playing, the visual is still playing back. So to get the timing right on those, you have to just follow the rhythm of the song and go from there. For the Fiona video, how long did it take to finish? A long time. It took a few months. It's hard to judge for that sort of thing because there's a lot of factors that go into it. It's not just animating straightforward. It's working back and forth with her and her team of folks. And so there are certain like check-in dates or like getting feedback, stuff like that. So the actual time isn't, I can tell you, like, I started animating I think in March, at least doing some testing stuff, and then it came out not that long ago. But it wasn't a constant grind between that start and when it premiered, but there were times where it's like ebbs and flows and it's dependent on a lot of outside factors. So if you're trying to see how long it would take you to create something like that, you really just have to try and see how it works for you. And again, a lot of people, when they say, my understanding is when a lot of people ask how long something takes, they're thinking to themselves, I want to know how long it takes, and then so I could redo it or do some version of it or have some connotation of the work. And it's not necessarily a reflection. It's not accurate to imagine yourself doing the same thing, because you would work differently and your pacing would be different and the amount of time, and there's a lot of factors. I can tell you I tried to keep up a pace of like 150 stills per day, but that was in stages, 150 stills in stages. So at the start it was much faster to trace to rotoscope her lips because it was pretty limited and predictable and consistent. There wasn't much variation in the amount of detail, and so that went by much faster. And then it came time to animate around it, and some sequences in the animation are just like drawing a line, and that's all that's in the animation around the rotoscoped lips. And then there are times where there's like 12 moving pieces and you have to animate each of those, and those could take like 10-15 minutes per still. So the amount of time, I just gave myself the markers of like 150 per day-ish, because that let me conceive of how to achieve the longer form video. And then I tried to trace out. So I printed out all the stuff and I would trace out the outlines, do 150 of those every day. And then I came back with a chisel brush and filled out the edges and filled in the moderate weight of like black areas. And then I came back at the end and filled in with like a 1-inch chunky brush, just large solid areas. And that was the fastest. It's the front and tail end that were the fastest elements. And then I had to calculate how long it would take me to scan about 4,000 stills. It takes almost 24 hours. It's scanning 18 seconds per scan per still. The actual animation start to finish ends up being 3,900 stills. There are some additional that were things that were revised and stuff like that. And there are some of those stills that don't necessarily have much or any drawing on them. It's just like a sort of blank area. But it's 3,900 frames at 15 frames per second. I've got piles of the stills that I'm planning on selling for charity. Looney Tunes shorts would have been a slower frame rate, and they're more likely to have had pausing elements. But yeah, animation has a lot of stills, and Looney Tunes would have been executed a bit differently. You would have had the people who were doing pencil tests to do the actual animation, like to work out the movement, and you'd have teams of people working on that, maybe focused on one character or something like that. And then I think for Looney Tunes it would have been this way. And then you have people who would then come through and using plastic sheets, celluloid, animation cells, that's where the term comes from, they would trace over the outline, and then you'd have a team of people who would ink it up, who would paint on the back of the cells to paint the ink in there. And then you would take that and apply it to a backdrop, like set the cell on top of a background painted image. And you might have elements that pause or wait for a minute and stuff like that. They're practical and time-saving measures that are used by most professional animation things. That's why it's something like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was a technical achievement, just because of the scale of it, like the understanding of what was possible. The stack's taller than 6 inches. I have to sort of separate them out because there's so much ink on the tracing paper. It's warped, so it doesn't lie flat. And so when I stack it, those little changes add up. Snow White's the sort of thing that, like a 4-minute mile. Like, people think that I don't have them stacked in one stack because they don't. It will fall over. Snow White's the sort of thing, like a 4-minute mile, like there was a period in time where it would have been like, you just can't do that. And then it gets done and people are like, oh, I guess you can do that. And then people start doing more and more ambitious stuff. Showing the ability to do something is a great way to make people make more ambitious things. Also, telling people that they can't do something is a good way to motivate them. Gotta get that spite energy. Any other questions? Glad you enjoy the live streams and such. If you want to revisit old ones where you can't interact with them and you won't be able to see the chat, you can go to YouTube, search TraceLoops. And there's, I don't know how many videos are there. I've gotten automated with uploading them that I don't really think about how much is there. Okay. Maybe one last shot at some questions and thoughts or concerns and stuff. I'm not sure if I understood what you were saying, but something about my explanation made you more aware of the process, and that's good enough for me. Or more aware of why I made choices. That's me using a toothpick. Bob Ross is a very nice thing to watch. Okay, well, if no more questions, then I'm gonna close stuff out, upload. You can watch on YouTube. If you search TraceLoops, you can watch stuff here. You can buy some shirts, stuff like that. Shirts at traceloops.com/store if you're outside the US or you have special requests sort of things that I might be able to fulfill. You can email me traceloops@traceloops.com, and if you're on TikTok, you can follow me there, TraceLoops. What was it? See the image of the lips and the chin alone in a second. Oh, you're talking about this one, not the Fiona Apple bit. Yeah, the lips were turned. It's like it's twisting out a little bit, trying to just give it a different sense of dimension and shape. Okay, thanks for watching. 70 miles. I don't remember what you were saying for the 70 miles. But thanks for clarifying. Miles, not minutes. I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about. Okay, bye. Thank you all for watching. Gonna stop.